Okay, so are you ready to dig into this stuff about the future of farming?
Yeah, let's do it.
This Farminaut guide, The 5 Essential Stages of Crop Farming, a visual guide for modern agriculture. It's uh it's a lot.
It is a lot to unpack.
But I think it's going to really change the way we think about where our food comes from.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, like when I hear farming, I'm still thinking like tractors and overalls, you
Yeah,
know?
like old school stuff.
Exactly. But this article is talking about things like satellites and AI.
It's like, whoa, hold on, farming has gone high tech.
I know. Satellites. Can you believe they're using those in agriculture now?
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it, all the data they can collect.
So it's not just about like taking pretty pictures from space.
No, not at all. This is like serious data collection.
Okay, so like what kind of data are we talking about here?
Well, for example, during the prep stage, Farminaut talks about how they're using satellites to analyze soil moisture.
Soil moisture.
Yeah, which is super important for knowing when and how to plant.
That makes sense.
And it doesn't stop there. They're using it for all sorts of things throughout the growing process.
So it's like having this super-powered eye in the sky watching over everything.
Exactly. Instead of having to walk acres and acres of land checking on each individual plant,
Farmers can get this like overall view of their entire farm from space.
that's the idea. And they can see things they might not be able to spot from the ground.
Like what kind of things?
Well, diseases spreading to the crops, nutrient deficiencies, things like that.
So instead of just reacting to a problem after it's already happened,
They can be proactive and address it early on.
which has got to be a game changer for farmers, especially smaller ones.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those early interventions can make all the difference.
And if they're catching things early on, maybe that means less need for pesticides and herbicides and stuff.
Exactly. Which is better for the environment and better for us in the long run.
It's a win-win.
And that's just one example. The article goes on and on about all the ways technologies are transforming agriculture.
Okay, so what's next on the list? What other tech are we talking about?
Well, they talk a lot about artificial intelligence, or AI.
AI. See, now that's where I start to get a little skeptical. I feel like AI is one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot.
It definitely gets a lot of hype.
Yeah, so how is it actually being used in a practical way on farms?
Well, one really interesting application is in planting. The article talks about this thing called the Jeevan AI Advisory System from Farminaut.
Okay, the Jeevan AI Advisory System.
And basically, this system takes into account all sorts of factors like hyperlocal weather forecasts, historical data from the farm soil conditions.
That's a lot of information.
It is. And it uses all that data to recommend the absolute best time to plant specific crops.
So instead of relying on, gut feeling or tradition,
Right. Which, let's be honest, can be a little hit or miss.
farmers now have this incredibly precise, data-driven planting schedule.
It's like farming by the numbers.
Okay, I can see how that'd be helpful. But what about once the seeds are actually in the ground? How does AI help with crop management?
So with crop management, this is where it gets really wild.
Okay, how so?
Imagine being able to predict pest outbreaks before they even happen.
Wait, really? Is that even possible?
Apparently it is. The article talks about how AI can analyze all sorts of data.
Like what?
Weather patterns, historical pest data from the farm, all kinds of stuff.
To figure out if the conditions are right for an infestation.
Exactly. So instead of waiting for a problem to show up,
Farmers can take steps to prevent it from happening in the first place.
it's like going from playing whack-a-mole to setting up a system where the moles never even reach the surface.
Oh, okay, that's a pretty good analogy.
And of course, if you're preventing these outbreaks, that means you need less pesticides.
Which again is better for everyone.
Right?
Right.
Healthier food, healthier environment. It's a win-win.
Okay, so we've got satellites, AI. It's like farming is becoming this high-tech industry.
It really is incredible how much technology is being used these days.
And it doesn't stop there. This Farminaut guide also mentions blockchain. Blockchain, like in agriculture. I'm not going to lie, that one threw me for a loop.
I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it actually makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so humor me. What does cryptocurrency have to do with carrots?
It's not really about the cryptocurrency itself. It's more about the technology behind it.
Okay, so what technology are we talking about?
Traceability. Imagine being able to track a head of lettuce all the way from the farm to your grocery store.
And blockchain can do that.
Exactly. It creates this permanent tamper-proof record of every step in the supply chain.
So you know exactly where that lettuce has been every step of the way.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so how would that be used in a practical
Well,
sense?
think about foodborne illness outbreaks.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah.
If there's a problem, investigators can use blockchain to trace it back to the source immediately.
So no more guessing games, no more having to issue these massive recalls because they don't know where the contamination happened.
Precisely. It adds this whole other layer of transparency and accountability to our food system.
Yep. And for consumers like me, it gives me a lot more confidence knowing exactly where my food is coming from.
And let's not forget the benefits for farmers, too. This kind of transparency can be huge for them.
How so?
Well, especially for farmers who are using sustainable or organic methods.
They can prove that they're doing things the right way.
Exactly. It's like a digital stamp of approval that sets them apart in the marketplace.
And potentially allows them to charge a premium for their products too.
Right. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. I have to admit, I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes, but I need to make sure I understand this correctly. We're talking about like actual digital information being embedded in a tomato, right?
Not exactly. It's not like we're putting microchips in our veggies or anything.
Okay.
Think of it more like a digital ledger that's keeping track of every transaction, every movement of that tomato.
So like a digital paper trail.
Basically, it's all tracked and recorded on the blockchain.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So we've got satellites, AI, blockchain. It's like the future of farming is already here.
It really is an exciting time to be talking about agriculture.
It is. But this Farminaut article, it just keeps going. They also mentioned something called the Internet of Things, or IoT.
Ah, yes, the IoT. It's everywhere these days.
But what does it actually mean, like, in the context of farming?
So basically, it's the idea of connecting everyday devices to the internet so they can communicate with each other.
Okay, so my refrigerator could talk to my coffee maker.
Exactly. But in farming, we're talking about things like sensors in the soil.
Okay, sensors in the soil.
And those sensors can monitor all sorts of things like moisture levels, temperature, nutrient content.
And they send that data back to the farmer.
Exactly. It's like having a team of tiny agricultural assistants working around the clock.
Constantly gathering information and sending you updates.
Precisely. And it's not just about monitoring either. This data can be used to automatically adjust things like irrigation systems.
So the crops are getting exactly the right amount of water they need when they need it.
Which is huge for efficiency, especially as we face things like water scarcity and drought.
And all of that data can be accessed remotely, right? The farmer doesn't have to be physically present in the field.
Exactly. They can monitor and manage their crops from anywhere in the world with an internet connection.
So we're talking about optimizing resource use, increasing yields, and reducing waste. It's like farming on autopilot.
In a way, yes. But it's important to remember that there's still a human element to all of this.
Of course, farmers are still the ones making the decisions and overseeing the whole operation.
Exactly. Technology is just a tool to help them do their jobs better.
This is incredible. But you know what else is incredible? That this Farminaut article just keeps going.
I know, right? They've packed so much information into this guide.
So what else is on the list of mind-blowing agricultural advancements?
Well, they touch on some really interesting things like vertical farming and something called CRISPR.
Vertical farming, okay, I've heard of that. Growing food in skyscrapers sounds pretty wild. But CRISPR? I'm not familiar with that. What is that all about?
So CRISPR is this gene editing technology that's causing quite a stir in the agricultural world.
Gene editing. Okay, that sounds a little intense. Are we talking about like Frankenfood here? Should I be worried? Okay, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
So before the break, we were talking about CRISPR and gene editing, and I have to say,
It's pretty wild stuff, right?
yeah, it kind of feels like we're stepping into the realm of science fiction here.
A little bit.
Mm.
But it's also really important to remember that this technology is being used right now.
It's not just some futuristic fantasy.
Exactly. It's happening as we speak. And it has the potential to really change the game when it comes to food production.
Okay, so you said before the break that CRISPR is a gene editing technology.
Right.
But what does that actually mean, like in a practical sense? What are they doing with this technology?
Well, one of the most promising applications is in developing crops that are more resistant to pests and diseases.
Okay, so instead of having to spray crops with pesticides,
You could essentially build that resistance into the plant itself.
and that's where the gene editing comes in.
Exactly. CRISPR allows scientists to make incredibly precise changes to the genetic code of an organism.
So are they like creating Frankenfoods?
That's a bit of an exaggeration.
Hmm.
CRISPR is simply a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
Okay, fair enough. But in the context of agriculture, what are the potential benefits?
Well, for starters, it could drastically reduce our reliance on pesticides.
Which would be a huge win for the environment and for our health.
Exactly. And it's not just about pests. CRISPR can also be used to make crops more resistant to drought or extreme temperatures.
So as the climate changes and we face more extreme weather patterns,
We could potentially engineer crops that are better equipped to survive and thrive.
that's incredible. So it's like giving these plants superpowers.
In a way, yes. We're essentially giving them the tools they need to adapt and flourish in a changing world.
Okay, so CRISPR, less pesticides, more resilient crops. Any other potential benefits we should know about?
Well, they're also looking at ways to use CRISPR to enhance the nutritional content of crops.
So like making them more nutrient dense.
Exactly. And that could have huge implications for global health,
Mhm.
especially in areas where malnutrition is a serious problem.
Wow, when you really start to think about the possibilities, it's mind-boggling.
It really is. CRISPR has the potential to revolutionize the way we produce food.
Okay, so we've talked about satellites, AI, blockchain, the Internet of Things, vertical farming, and now CRISPR.
It's like a crash course in the future of agriculture.
It really is. And honestly, it's a lot to take in, but in a good way. It's exciting to think about all the incredible innovations happening in this field.
I completely agree. It's an exciting time to be talking about agriculture.
It is, and I think it's something that we as consumers should be paying more attention to.
Absolutely. The choices we make about what we eat have a ripple effect.
They impact not just our own health, but the health of the planet as well.
And I think as we become more aware of the challenges facing our food system,
We can start to make more informed choices and support companies and organizations that are working towards a more sustainable and equitable future.
exactly, every little bit helps.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the future of farming, what's the one takeaway you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the future of food is not set in stone.
It's not some predetermined path we're all stuck on.
Exactly. It's a future that we're all actively shaping through the choices we make every day.
So whether it's supporting local farmers, reducing food waste, or staying informed about these new technologies.
We all have a role to play in creating a food system that's healthy, sustainable, and just.
That's a great message to end on. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for this incredible conversation about the future of farming.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.